He eventually found a Rolodex, which is basically like a big book full of phone numbers and addresses. And as the detective was flipping through that book, that was how he discovered that Monica had an ex-husband, John Schmeier. That evening, Detective Demagon and another investigator rolled up to John Schmeier's house. They walked up to the front door and they knocked, and then a moment later, the door opened, and John was standing there looking very surprised. So, in homicide cases, generally speaking, the spouse or ex-spouse is always suspect number one. And so even though Demagon didn't really have any evidence linking John to the crime, he did have the fact that this was her ex-spouse, and so therefore, he is suspicious. Before John could ask any questions, Demagon and his partner introduced themselves and said they'd like to come in and speak to John. So John said, okay, come on in. So they walked inside, they sat down, and then once they were seated, Detective Demagon watched John very closely as he told him why they were there. Basically, your ex-wife has been murdered, and we're here to talk to you about it. Detective Demagon wanted to see if John would have a big reaction or maybe a subdued reaction. Whatever reaction he might have could be telling to how involved he maybe was or wasn't in this case. When Demagon told John that Monica had been shot to death, John's reaction was huge. His eyes went wide, he clutched at his chest like he was having a heart attack, and then he kind of leaned forward and began sobbing. But when he came back up again, the detective noticed there were no tears in John's eyes. It was just this sort of huge reaction, but Demagon couldn't really tell if it was genuine or not. He also didn't have a baseline for John. He didn't know if this was normal, but this seemed really dramatic, almost like he might be acting. So instead of trying to console John, Demagon just asked point blank, where were you earlier this afternoon at the time of the shooting? And when he asked this, John, who still was sort of rocking back and forth and grabbing his chest and acting very upset, he suddenly stopped, put his hands by his side, and just said, oh, I was at Hooters with my friends. A few days later, Detective Demagon went to the Hooters, where John and his friends would always meet up, and he asked the manager to see the security footage from the previous Wednesday, the day of the shooting. So by this point, Demagon had actually already interviewed all of the friends who had been at the Hooters with John, the so-called Orange Shorts Society, and he had asked them all about John. Like, had he really been there? What was he doing? What was he saying? And they all said John absolutely was there the whole time. Like, there's no way he could have left and done anything to Monica. He was here with us. I promise you he was here. Now, they would admit to the detective that